everyone. So thank you for joining on this first global session for the Global Responsibility Week within CEMS. Within this week, we really try to raise awareness for societal and environmental issues, and we do this through a lot of initiatives, mostly local. So locally with your CEMS Club, you are partaking in some activities, doing some challenges, which is great. And with the student board, we thought it might be interesting for you to also do an event with CEMSies from all over the world to learn more about what is doing good and what is the best way to do good. And this is why we paired up with the associate organization Effective Altruism, from which Jan Willem van Putten is joining from Rotterdam in the Netherlands, to learn us more about what is the best way to do good and how can we go about effective organizations, or even what is very relevant for us as students right now choosing our careers is what kind of careers would fit us and our ambitions to make a good impact on the world. So with this being said, I would like to give the word to Jan Willem, who will tell you way more insightful things today.
Yes, thanks a lot, Vera, for the introduction. Welcome all. The first thing I will do is to share my screen. So, so my name is Jan Willem van Putten. I'm the Managing Director of Effective Altruism Netherlands. And I will give a short presentation about effective altruism, what is it, and especially focused on career options, and I think very impactful careers, like Vera mentioned. So first, introduction to effective altruism. I want to start with a poll, and I want you to think about the following. So when you donate money to charity, I don't know, probably some of you will donate, not all of you. Do you understand what the impact of your donation will be? So do you have any idea about how many lives are saved, or people will have a better life? Are you not at all aware, only a little bit, quite aware, or fully aware? And then I also want you to think about when you invest your money, so you buy shares or you lend money to people, do you understand what the return on your investment will be? Do you make any calculations beforehand to think about what the return will be financially? Yeah, and there's a third question, but you cannot answer that towards the end. If you are aware about the most optimal career paths that contribute to a better world. So do you have any idea what to do when you want to make impact?
Perfect. So I hope everyone can see. I just shared the poll results from these questions.
Okay, quite interesting. When I look at the results, I think people find it equally, that's surprising for me, to be honest. They understand equally well if they donate money to charity, what the impact will be, and if they invest their money, what the return of the investment will be. That surprises me a bit, to be honest, because most of the times people say they quite know when they lend money out or they invest in something, they have some idea or they made some calculation about what it will deliver. But if they donate money to charity, they have no ideas. But for you, it's kind of the same. So that's interesting. And about the career paths, that doesn't surprise me. I see that a lot of people are not very aware, or they only know a little bit what career paths to choose. Well, that's good news for me, because then I give this talk for the right reasons, I think, because I hope that at the end of this talk, you will have a better idea about what career to pick when you want to have an impactful career. So let's work on that today. So we can continue now the presentation, close the poll. So what's effective altruism then? Effective altruism, I would say, combines doing good with a rational approach. So doing good not only with the heart, but also with the head. And a few things are really, really important for us. So we want to see we want to be fact-driven. We want to see if stuff that we're doing is effective. And we do this by using data, research, and we calculate the expected value of certain investments we make doing good. So when giving money to charity, we want to see, okay, what's the expected amount of lives that we'll save? Or how much CO2 do we compensate just to stop climate change, for example. As sometimes the future is unsure, so you want to calculate expected value. Besides that, we also look at counterfactuals. So we always think, what if we do nothing? What happens then? And if we invest money, what will happen? Probably. So what's the expected value then? We always look at the counterfactual. And on the other hand, we want to be altruistic. So we want to be effective altruists. And altruistic, in a sense, is a bit different maybe than a normal definition. So we have what is called an impartial concern for welfare. So we do not differentiate between nationalities. So we say people from the Netherlands are equally worth from people in the States or in Africa or in South America. We do not differ between species. So animal lives are also important, maybe not as important as human lives. We can discuss about that, but it is important to think about animals as well and their welfare. And we also do not differentiate too much between time. So a future life, someone who's living 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, or maybe hundreds of thousands of years from now, is also very important. It's not that if someone lives in the year 3000, that the life of that person doesn't have any value. So how do you assess global problems then? So what are the most important pressing problems of our time? And thinking about the framework I just mentioned, or thinking about the like we want to look at the data, think about that. So what's the framework we can use? The framework we can use is the SSN framework. And the first S is the S for skill. So we always look at the size of the problem. So if we solve a certain problem, how good will it be? How much of the problem do we solve? We want to look at the solvability. So is it possible to solve a certain problem? If we dedicate, for example, double our resources or triple, does it get any better? Or does the problem stay the same? And finally, we also look at neglectedness. So how many resources are already going to a certain problem? For example, climate change is quite popular. There are many resources going to climate change. Still, it is a very important topic, but maybe there are other problems that get less attention and are also very pressing. So yeah, we look at these three aspects. And when you look at these three aspects, you get certain what we call cause areas that are the most pressing. And they are maybe not that surprising to you. Some of them will probably. So poverty and health. I mean, a lot of people know that there are poor people in the world, in bad health. The expected or the life expectancy in certain parts of the world is lower than in Western countries, of course. So that doesn't surprise you. Other important cause areas for effective altruists are animal factoring. I told about that. So we think that animal lives have a lot of value. And because of that, animal factoring is very important, because I think most animals are animals who live in cages, who are eaten by us. And that's something we can work on. It's a very large problem. It's a larger problem, for example, than animals in the wild, because they are with way less number-wise. And also solvability there is a bit lower. I mean, we can do a lot about animal factoring. Institutional decision-making, that's more or less about making public decisions better in better ways than we do currently. I think some of you read about this. So right now we have a democracy. You have a government that's there for 4 years. It's maybe a short time. Is it effective to have a democracy like that, where people act way more on the short term, for example? And are there any ways to improve that? Climate change, still very important. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but there are very, very large tail risks there. So there is a possibility that the Earth will be heated by 5 or 6 degrees. And that's a really, really tough problem, because that could be the end of our species. Biorisks, well, I would say a year ago, people would say, what's a biorisk? Currently, of course, we all know what a biorisk is. It's like, for example, a pandemic. You can have multiple kind of pandemics. You can have engineered pandemics. So that's a virus coming from a lab. Or you can have a pandemic that's coming from a bat, like currently coming from an animal. That is not on purpose and brought into society. Still very large risk for us as humans. Another one, and that sounds very futuristic, is positively shaping the future of AI, artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence comes with an enormous potential, positively and negatively. Some of you will have heard about it, but there is a possibility that AI will get smarter than us human beings, will maybe outsmart us, especially when we don't think enough about how to implement artificial intelligence. And if you think this is very futuristic, well, think about The Social Dilemma on Netflix now. You currently see that artificial intelligence already destabilizes our democracy. And there you see the danger of AI. Right now, think about that we have very weak AI currently. If AI gets stronger, the risk gets bigger. And actually, this is one of the biggest risks for our society. Other cause areas, like effective altruism movement building, spread the word about this. And there are some more cause areas that are maybe less important, but I cannot talk about them all since this is just a talk of 1 hour. Then it's really interesting. So then you say, okay, within all these cause areas, there are many things you can do. And probably it isn't that important to think about what I should do within a certain cause area, but it is very important. Usually people think that the cost effectiveness of an intervention or of all interventions plotted looks something like the graph on the left. So you have some interventions that are maybe a bit more effective. You have some interventions that are less effective. It's a nice straight line, but this is just not the case. The cost effectiveness looks like the graph on the right. So there are a few very, very cost effective things you can do in global health. They are 1,000 times more effective than the average. So what I want to say with this graph is it is very important. It's even more important to think about what am I going to donate to than if you donate at all. I mean, so you should think about this very clearly before you start donating to charities. So to make an illustration of this, a heart is 1 year of a healthy life. And if you think about piped water, flushing toilets, it's a nice intervention you can do. And if you spend $1,000 on this, you can save half a year of a healthy life. Sounds reasonable, huh? Build a toilet, water, don't drink it from the pool, have piped water, 6 months. But when you go further and you think about household chlorination, you already see that it is way more effective. Instead of $500, it's around it's even $5,500. And if you go and add some zinc for oral rehydration, so there are a lot of people in the third world who have diarrhea, they get dehydrated. And if you add some zinc for rehydration, that saves even way more lives. But we can do way better. Investing in malaria treatment and prevention. Well, I can't count the hearts here. So that's I mean, multiple times what it is, the life saved compared to, for example, piped water and flushing toilets. But then it's interesting, where do people invest their money in? A lot of people in Western countries will invest their money in new drugs for cancer. And cancer is, of course, really important. It's a very bad disease. I had some family members who have it currently and had it in the past. But it isn't very efficient to invest in cancer drugs compared to the other cause areas or the other health and development interventions I mentioned earlier. So thinking about it, another example, sometimes doing good sounds really nice. You can have a great story, but it can have disastrous consequences in real life. So I want to tell you the story of the play pumps for this. Play Pump International was a charity, and they had a fantastic idea. They said, okay, you have mostly women in third world countries. They have to get water from pumps, have to walk for this. Then they have to pump. That's, I mean, a lot of hassle to get some water. Can't we think about something smarter? They thought about this for a while, and then they came with the play pump, because they said there are also a lot of kids in these countries and they have energy. So if we let them run in a play pump, they can pump water while running in this play pump, which is a lot of fun for the kids. Everyone is happy. You have water at the end. So they had this idea, started producing them, made a lot of marketing efforts, and there were a lot of American celebrities who said this is a fantastic idea on Twitter and on all kinds of media. And they received millions of investments. But then after, I think, a year, the first negative media attention came because it was too tough for kids to play with the play pump. So the women still had to do it. They thought it was awful to do. They felt really bad about it, that they had to play in this play pump just to get water, something very important. But still, people were investing in play pumps, and that kept going and still keeps going, I think, until today, because people don't think about charity in a rational way. They think, oh, it sounds great, it sounds fantastic, let's do it. But it isn't that great when it doesn't work. But luckily, there are also stories that are completely the other way around. Sometimes you have surprising interventions that you didn't expect beforehand, but that have a very large positive effect. And the story I want to tell you here is a story about deworming. Actually, there are a few people who won the Nobel Prize for this research. I think Kramer is one of them. And the story here is that they try to increase school results from people in the third world, from kids. And they tried everything. So a lot of interventions. So they tried extra books. They tried extra teachers, nice school buildings, a lot of different stuff. And it all didn't work out that well. And then there was one person who said, the rate of absenteeism, so the number of kids that don't show up, is quite high. It's actually too high. It's sometimes 20, 30%, and that has very negative consequences. And the reason for that was that kids were sick. And the reason for that was that they had a lot of parasites. So he thought, what if we give all these children a pill once a year, a deworm pill, where they get rid of all the parasites? What will be the results, or what will be the consequences for their school results? And actually, they were fantastic. So the school results increased dramatically. And also the income. When you look 20 years later, you see that people who got these pills earn 13% more. They have a 13% income increase compared to people who didn't receive this treatment. The cost of this treatment is 50 cents per pill. I mean, that's value for money, huh? I think that's a great story that really describes how good it can be if you help people in the right way. So yeah, I want to ask you if there are any questions, but I think the group is a bit too large for that. So I want to say now, yeah, looking at all this, I think there is a lot that you can do to make the world a better place. So what you can do, if you listen to the story and thought, okay, if it's that easy to help the world, what can I do? The first thing I want to mention is that there's voluntary work that you can do. And that's where I will tell some more about in the coming slides. But there are many career paths that you could follow. I mean, I already explained that there are multiple cause areas that are really important looking at the data. You can work in one of them to make the world a better place. And besides that, there's also a global movement of effective altruism, and it's growing. And they always need volunteers for projects. So even when you're still studying and you want to do something just next to your study, or also maybe next to your job later, there are many positions for volunteers. Now, something else you can do is donate. Currently, you are a student, and when I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money, but hopefully within a few years, you will have a lot of money. And what you can do is actually you can save one life with a donation of around $2,300. And what I mean by saving a life is someone who's 4 years old now, saved it from malaria for the rest of for her life. So that means the coming like 60 years. But you can also, if you have different objectives, for example, climate change, you can donate to Clean Air Task Force and easily offset your own contribution to climate change. A nice slogan is improve the world, work for Wall Street. So a lot of people think, when you work for Wall Street, you must be a really, really bad person. I think you are, unless you give 20% of your income to effective charities. Yeah, you can change your behavior. And I must say that's often less impactful than donating. So for example, when you look at climate change, I think for around 16 euros a year, you can offset your own emissions. 16, 20 euros a year. Depends, of course, a bit on if you're flying a lot. If you're flying more, it's maybe 100. But that's good to know. So donating is usually more impactful than behavior change. Although, of course, it is important. So you can take a look at this calculator I've added here to see what your own footprint is. And maybe there are things like eating meat that you can change to make the world a better place. Another thing that you can do, if you really like this idea of doing good better in an effective way, is reading some books about this. I think Doing Good Better by Will McCaskill is a great starting point. It's very fun to read. You will go through it quite quickly. Listening to podcasts, especially the 80,000 Hour podcast is really nice, I think. And attend certain EA events. I will talk about that later, but there are local groups everywhere, I think in all countries you study currently. So it's quite easy to find your local community. And after you've all done this, you can spread the word yourself and can show people how they can do the most good with their lives, with their careers and their donations. So, well, I think most of you will start a job within a year, or maybe some even faster or less fast, but so it's very important to properly think about it. And a lot of you will have done this already. So we'll think about, okay, should I join a bank or a consultancy firm or whatever? Yeah, I want to talk a bit more about how to choose an impactful career. So one that really, really contributes to a better world in the ways I've described earlier in my presentation. So those are very good resources on this. Actually, 80,000 Hours is an organization that's fully focusing on this. And what they say is, okay, a typical career lasts for 80,000 hours. That's the amount of hours you will work in your life, and some of them even a bit more. If that's the case, I mean, if you can make your career 1% better impact-wise, in theory, it will be worth spending around 800 hours working out how to do that. That's a very large investment. And luckily, I can tell you, if you listen to the advice of 80,000 hours, you can do it by spending way less than that 800 hours. If you do it in a structured way, maybe 100 hours or 200 hours is more than enough. And that's really, really worth it. So some general career advice I can give you. First one, don't go with your gut instinct. I think a lot of people say, well, you should follow your passions, your heart, your gut. That's very hard. When you're in college or in your master's and it's your last year, you probably won't know where you're good at, what your passions will be, because you've seen some of the world, but not enough. So it's good to use a rational approach instead of just to think about, what are my passions? They also say that people who follow their passions are normally less happy with their career choices. it's good to start with the skills you want to develop and think from that. Second point, if you want to have an impactful career, deciding on your cause area, I would say, is one of the most important decisions. So what do you think is really valuable? Is it the climate? Is it maybe safe artificial intelligence? Is it that you think that health and development is really important, that you want to help people in the third world who suffer from all kinds of diseases that we don't have to suffer from? Think about this. And that's something personal, I would say. It's different for everyone. Then it's good to have a 5 to 25 year long-term career plan and a plan B when you think about this. So when you have thought about the cause area, you can make a plan. And from that plan, you can generate short-term options. I will talk some more about that. And I think a very important thing, personal fit. So if you don't like a certain job, passion is something else, but if you completely don't like a certain job, then it's maybe not for you, because you will burn out in a year or so. And then 80,000 hours thought about the most promising career paths. So they did a lot of analysis about what are the world's most pressing problems, what are the jobs that can help us to tackle those problems. And they made a list about what the most effective career choices are. So this is their main list. And in the red boxes, you can find the ones that I think are most suitable for CEMS alumni to apply to. So there are a few about AI, AI safety, AI policy and strategy. Well, that is very important, but maybe less so for CEMS students. I think for CEMS students, Grantmaker focused on the top priority is really nice. I mean, you need some business sense, I think, to work on that. So a Grantmaker decides if certain donations are important or not, and where they should, where a certain NGO should focus on. I would say that's something someone with a CEMS background can do quite easily. Work in effective altruism organizations. There are many nonprofits that are effective, and they always need people who have a very, very good business overview, being in logistics, finance, HR, all kinds of business departments. Global priorities researcher. A global priorities researcher is actually someone who researches what the most pressing problems are and where we should focus on. Also something you can do with a business background. And another one I think that's really, really suitable is earning to give. So start working in a very high paying role. Think about quantitative trading, banking, maybe consulting, strategy consulting. The good thing about that is that you also acquire a lot of career capital that is applicable to other sectors. I would say those 4 are quite suitable for CEMS students. There are a few other promising career paths, 80,000 hour mentions. So one of them being non-technical roles in leading AI labs. So I mentioned before that artificial intelligence is a very important cause area. And within an AI lab, you also need people who are non-technical, but are very good in organizing, acquiring funding and stuff like that. That's also something you could easily work on with your background. Other things being use your skills to meet a need in a community, the effective altruism community itself, to be a non-profit entrepreneur. So it's also interesting if you go to charityentrepreneurship.com. They donate money to people who want to start their own non-profit. So if you're a real entrepreneurial type and you know how to solve a certain pressing problem, you can apply there for money. It's very, I quite like it since I have a background as an entrepreneur myself. And you can solve a problem with your own organization in that way. And finally, creating or managing a long-term philanthropic fund. So you have a few very rich people on this earth, and if you are able to target them with a nice story about effective charities, and you manage a fund for them, I mean that's incredibly valuable. because there are a few people. The wealth is very concentrated on this earth, and if you are able to target those people with a good talk and you have those skills, then this is a very good option for you.
Before we go to the next topic, Jan Willem, there's a question from Amanda, who is curious about what kind of effective altruism organizations you can join to actually make an impact. Yeah,
that's a very good question. So there are a lot of charities within the different cause areas. So what I would say, and there are also what we call meta organizations. So those are organizations that promote the idea of effective altruism or do research. One of them being Center for Effective Altruism. They're always looking for people. One of them being 80,000 hours, and they give career advice to students or people early in their career. So those are a few organizations. Yeah, in health and development, you have the Evidence Action, who do deworming, Against Malaria Foundation, Give Directly, who specializes in cash transfers to the least well-off. So those are a few examples. If you're really interested in one of these cause areas, you can send me an email afterwards, and I can easily tell you, what effective altruism organizations are to join. Any other questions that came up, Vera? Or
no, that's it for all, except if somebody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question. Otherwise, we can go on.
Okay, I would say there are 3 steps you can take in order to make a plan for high career impact. First, explore the problem areas. So I talked a bit about the cause areas, but there's of course way more written about this in other places. So to form an opinion on what you really think is important, it's a good idea to read resources at 80,000 hours on this. So you can read, okay, what is the certain cause area? What are the important jobs there? Just go and click around a bit. And after you've done this, you can pick one. And you can say, for example, okay, I really feel that I should work in climate change, for example. Then it's very good to figure out the second step. So long-term options. Think about the career capital you gain from your first job and the personal fit. So career capital, what I mean by career capital is if you start as a strategy consultant, you probably will learn some things. And I know this from experience, that you can use in every other organization. We call this transferable career capital. It's always good to think about transferable career capital when you pick your first job.
And maybe you can tell more about what you did in your career, just to give an example of how it helped you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what I did, so I started my career as a strategy consultant. OCNC is a British firm, and I worked a lot for private equity actually. And what I learned there is to do a lot of quantitative analysis. So I worked a lot with data. And actually what I did later in my career is using these skills, so analyzing certain problems with the help of data. I now use this in a more social setting. For example, just today, I was making a calculator, an impact calculator for people who want to donate. And for me, it's really easy to do some Excel analysis and make a sheet that's which I can send to people, which I can fill out to see what the impact of their donations will be. So that's something I learned in strategy consulting, but I can still use it for my role today. I also worked in education a lot where they're not used to working with data. I introduced them to working with data, dashboarding and stuff like that. All things I acquired in my first job, very transferable skills. And I mean, especially in the social sector, there's always a need for people who have this quantitative mindset. They are very rare. Usually there are people who study social sciences and stuff like that. So if you have if your first job is a place where you can acquire those skills, it's definitely a good pick, I would say. So I was at the second step. It's very interesting to think about long-term options, where you want to work on 5 to 25 years, and a long-term plan. I think two things are very important. Should have a problem area and a role type. So for example, if you want to work on artificial intelligence, that's a problem area. You should also think about the role type. So for example, I want to lead an artificial intelligence lab. I want to do research, or I want to acquire funding, or can be everything. So that's what should be in a long-term plan. And the next step, that's I would say the most important step, or they're all important, but just to make it concrete in short-term options. So it's fun to think about that you want to be the director of an AI lab in the future, but you should think about how to go there. What are my short-term options to come at that position where I want to go? You can rank options. It's always very good to think about key uncertainties. So, okay, I want to be the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Where the most is it very hard to become the leader of a popular party? What are the key uncertainties in my options there? And it's good to do cheap tests. And what I mean by cheap tests is also to talk with people, or maybe you have doubts that you have the right qualities to become a strategy consultant. Maybe you can just send an application letter, send a motivation letter and your CV to a company, and you will immediately know. So don't try to think too long with yourself. Go outside, talk with people, and do cheap tests to test if it's something for you. So I think it's time for a poll again. I talk too much. If there are any questions, by the way, maybe before we jump in the poll, it's a good time to answer some questions. So are there any people who think, who have a question for me about their careers? You can leave them in the chat as well, then Vera can ask. You're muted.
For now, there are no questions, but I think later on with the breakout rooms, we will discuss more and come up with them.
There was one question in the chat from before.
Oh.
Oh, yes. From Beatrice, she says most charities don't donate 100% of the donations to the relevant causes. Is there a percent that is considered as good enough, or specific resources, external checks to find out how effective an organization is at donating?
That's a great question. Thanks a lot for that, because here's something I really need to clarify. So there are some people that say, okay, an intervention should always channel at least 95% of donations to the eventual goal. And we as Effective Altruists, we don't agree with that, because if I have a certain goal and I say, okay, I have a charity and my charity just puts money in holes. So all the donation money, I want to just put it in a hole on the street. And I do this with 100% of money. You can say, okay, that's really, really, really effective. That's a great charity. But then if you ask me, is it a great charity? Of course, I say no. Since there are no lives saved, nothing is better. So I would say, instead of looking at this number too much, it's way better to look at how many lives do you save per euro? How many CO2 do you get out of the air? So very valuable metrics instead of this, because it is very valuable for a charity, for example, to do good monitoring and evaluation, to think about what you should do in a proper way and how you can improve. And that costs money, because you need to pay people for this work. And also, probably it is really valuable to pay your director a certain amount of money that's more than 30K, because you want to attract a very good director for your nonprofit, because he will improve effectiveness even more than efficiency. So it's a good question, but I would say that's not the real relevant point here. It's more about effectiveness than efficiency. Okay.
Hi, thank you for the answer. I was the one that asked the question. Really insightful.
Yeah, Was the answer sufficient like this, or do you have any?
Yeah, it was, because I'm looking into exactly like how effective certain charities are at making their donations, but indeed it's quite hard to compare because I don't know what to benchmark it to, but it's a good idea, as you said, to rather focus on, for example, if it's a food charity, how many meals are they delivering compared to other similar organizations?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's the right mindset. I mean, everything besides that is not important, I would say. So the amount that the cleaners earn in the company is not important for the effectiveness, for example. Okay. Other questions? No other questions? Then I will continue with a poll. So I told you a bit about some optimal career paths. I mean, this was just the very, very beginning of it. Do you have a little more idea about what an optimal career path could be, or what the optimal career paths are? Of course, you have to do a lot of research for this. Okay, so I thought at the beginning of the presentation, the only a little bit bar was even was way larger. Almost 50% of people are quite or fully aware currently of what they're doing, and I'm happy to see that. I must say, of course, this is a very short introduction of 20-30 minutes maybe about this topic, and you should read way more to make to create a nice career path for yourself. But this could be a nice starting point, and I would especially recommend 80,000 hours for this. So if you want to have an impactful career, go to their website. They have information about all the course areas and all the different jobs you can pick. But I'm glad to see that you are a bit more aware. Okay, I will tell a bit more about earning to give, donating. Earning to give is the principle, like I mentioned earlier, where you earn quite a lot of money, work for Wall Street, improve the world, and donate it to effective charities. We call that earn to give. So if you want to donate, there are a few places where you could look at. So GiveWell is an organization started by some formal hedge fund employees. And they thought it was really strange that in their normal job as hedge fund managers, they quantified everything. And they use so much data, but when looking at charities, they thought people don't use data. And that was why two persons started GiveWell. And what they do in health and development, they rank all the charities and they recommend 9 charities that are very, very effective. So one of them being Against Malaria Foundation, which is a very effective charity, or Give Directly. And if you want to donate, I think this is a very good starting point, especially if you want to donate in health and development. If you say, okay, animal welfare is my cause area, and I think that animal welfare is the most important part, you can go to animal charity evaluators. They make the same kind of list, but then purely focused on organizations that improve the welfare of animals around the earth. Finally, there's Founders Pledge. Founders Pledge is an organization for people, they target people who have startups, and they say, okay, if you have a startup, and if it becomes a success and you sell your company maybe after 5 or 10 years and you are a millionaire, do you want to donate a certain amount of that money to us? And they do a lot of research, actually. So they have a very large research department. And they focus on, I would say, everything besides the things that GiveWell and animal charity evaluators focus on. So they will focus on climate change, for example, on mental health, which is also a cause area. So how to improve mental health on this earth most. And it's very interesting to see. So a lot of interventions that are really promising there are, for example, Strong Minds. Strong Minds is an intervention in Africa where they have group therapy for depressed, mostly women. And it's very, very effective in improving mental health. Another one, something else that they really recommend is funding some research for psychedelics. Also very interesting. That's more, you can apply it everywhere. So there's a lot of research going on now in how psychedelics can improve mental health. So help people with severe depression or people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's also something they recommend. I want to say one more thing about animal charity evaluators. So it's really interesting. If you look to the most effective goals there, they are all focused on factory farming and not on wild animal welfare or on pets living on the street. And it's really interesting because when you look at the number of donations right now, currently, they are flowing to wild animal welfare and pet welfare, while they're just 1% of the total animals on Earth. That's really strange. So 99% of the animals are cage animals. And yeah, if you want to be effective, you should focus on them. So animal charity evaluators recommend some really nice goals for this. One of them being pro-veg, and they really try to get create a more like vegetarian, vegan society. You can find some more on that if you go to animal charity evaluators. So yeah, what you can do after this talk, what I would really recommend is just continue reading, listening, and watching. This is a whole list of very nice, and I can share this presentation with you after the talk. Yeah, with valuable resources ranging from books, podcasts, YouTube movies about this. Yeah, it's I mean, it is a topic where you can think about a lot, write about a lot, and a lot of people did this. So thankfully, you can keep learning. For the people who think this was really interesting and they really want to know how to do the most good, and they think, okay, I want to find a nice high impact career path, for example, there is a student summit. That's a coincidence. Actually, that is, I think, this weekend. You can apply until today. So if you think this is really interesting and you have a weekend where you are in a partial lockdown, like in the Netherlands, and you sit at home, or you are in quarantine because you're sick, or your housemate is sick, yeah, just apply. It's really nice. You can learn way more about this. You can meet people from all over the globe who want to know more about effective altruism. Was there a question, Vera, coming in? Did I see them?
No, I just shared the link to the event.
Great. Okay. If you can't attend the event, no problem at all. What I mentioned before, there are local effective altruism groups all over the world. I made a list for you, so I looked it up for all locations of CEMS where the local groups are. That's a list Vera is able to share as well, I think, with you after this meeting. But you can also take a look at eahub.org and you can see where the local groups are. So if you want to meet more people who like this, and you can always take a look after one session. If you don't like the people, you can just leave it. So yeah, thanks a lot for everything, for inviting me here. And yeah, I wish you all a lot of luck.
Thank you very much, Jan Willem, for all these great insights and inspiring us, also showing that it's possible to go into impact after going to consulting for social impact.